Hi everybody, this is Stillman, bringing you the first installment in our series on Fibonacci, the golden ratio, and its application in technical analysis. I decided to cut this up in several digestible chunks, and today I want to start out with like an overview of the origins and the natural occurrences of the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio in nature. And I decided to start with this because a lot of people assume that the validity and the application in technical analysis is more of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in the sense that if enough people do it, then it will come true. And if like bots are programmed to do it, then of course the levels would hit and would cause reactions. And I wanted to present to you a couple of reasons of why I think that that's not the full story. And I think that Fibonacci playing out on our charts and in price can be framed as more of a natural phenomenon than as complete like herd behavior. In the end, it turns out to probably be herd behavior, but there's a reason why the herd behaves the way it does. And a very recent occurrence of this, or a good opportunity to observe this, was actually the first days trading on Uniswap, where almost nobody had the means to draw lines on charts, to apply Fibonacci tools to that price action. I think we can assume that even bots weren't ready for it when it hit, and there might have been a couple actually, but I think that when the masses came, that was the predominant price action that we could observe. And on some of these charts, if you open them now and you apply Fibonacci tools, you will see that the levels were still super clean. So why is that? We could ask ourselves. We're going to start with Leonardo da Pisa, aka Leonardo Fibonacci. He was one of the most influential medieval Western mathematicians, and he's widely known for discovering the sequence that was named after him. So the Fibonacci sequence has actually been applied and has been known earlier than that. For example, in antique Greece, in early Indian math and mysticism, and you find the golden ratio in the architecture of the pyramids, for example. And the golden ratio is even mentioned in the Bible, for example, when giving the measurements for the Ark of the Covenant, and also Noah receiving the measurements that he is supposed to use when building the ark. So the sequence goes like this: 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, and so on. And it's derived by doing these calculations, which is like adding the number to the number like before it. 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, and so on. So that's pretty easy. So Fibonacci's discovery was kind of like, it was based in part on an idealized observation of population growth in rabbits. This is not how this works in actual biology, but that's what he used. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, that this is basically a model of growth, of natural growth. And in his work, we can actually see where he wrote down the sequence right here. And there are many occurrences of this in nature, and actually the family trees of male bees is an actual example of the Fibonacci sequence. So while it's not true for rabbit populations, it holds true for other animal populations in nature. And we're getting closer to our application in technical analysis now. When we divide the Fibonacci numbers next to each other, that produces a number that is converging with the golden ratio. And the golden ratio is very important in technical analysis. And we get closer to the golden ratio, the higher we reach in the Fibonacci sequence. This 89 divided by 55 actually gets us pretty close. That's the golden ratio phi. And this is like a geometrical example of how that plays out. So the growth model in Fibonacci takes place here in these squares, and that gives us this very, very typical snail house-like geometrical figure. And if we can take this further, and if we start dividing Fibonacci numbers that are further apart, that are not next to each other, and we can also take square roots of certain existing ratios. Then we get what I call here minor Fibonacci ratios that also are applied when we use like the Fib tools on technical analysis, like in software like TradingView. Divide 13 by 55, you get 0.236. Here we have the 0.382. The 0.786 is important oftentimes too. That's the square root of 0.168. And then the square root of the 0.786 gives us 0.886. So here we have a couple of examples of how the golden ratio comes up in nature. And as you can see here, it shows itself in the smallest things in flora and fauna, and it extends to weather phenomena and to the structure of whole galaxies. The human body itself in its ratios also follows the golden ratio very, very closely in many increments. As you can see here, and as you can see here, with like just how an arm or even the hand itself is divided, we have that fractal ratio showing up from the larger structure down to the smaller part. And this might be a pretty stylized or idealized way of putting this, but it even shows up on that genetic level. Here we have the galaxy again, and the golden ratio applies in music that is pleasant to the ears and pleasant to the mind. So it basically is everywhere. So why not in price? And that leads us to the question of how this all applies to technical analysis. What you see here is a basic chart that plots the Fibonacci sequence upwards. And if we add this, it already resembles what we are used to as looking at as a parabola. And if we overlay that with a price chart, I believe I use Bitcoin for this, then you can already see what we are getting at here. So in the next installment of the series, we're going to look at specific tools and specific techniques that we can apply to get this law of nature into our charting. See you then. Bye-bye.